What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Styx, Blades of Greed, which is an upcoming stealth title set to release in the middle of February, give or take. But currently, right now, the way I'm bringing you this video is actually that they have a demo that is available until then. And after checking it out and honestly having a really good time with it, I decided to obviously share that with people. But speaking for myself, of course, Styx is a game series that I have been a little familiar with but had not played previously, though there are some things that I knew about it. For instance, like the universe it's set in of orcs and men does some fun stuff with like twists on the usual things. In particular, for the Styx games, we play as Styx, a goblin who is a master of stealth, which is kind of necessary when you live in a world where humankind actually persecutes orcs, goblins, and basically anything different from them, really, which has resulted in no small amount of conflict with, obviously, the orcs especially, but playing as a goblin, you require a little bit more finesse, as you are not exactly a hardened warrior who is going to survive a lot of hits to the face. Now, there have been, as you probably picked up from that, a couple of other Styx games, two, I believe, in fact. But the reason I wanted to jump in and check out this one is really because of the approach it is taking to exploration, movement, and approaches to various things. So probably the first thing to know is that despite the fact that this is a stealth game, you're going to have access to multiple areas, a character hub. You'll be able to do quests for companions that hang out with you on said hub, which is actually a zeppelin that you'll be flying around the continent in. But what that means functionally is, outside of being able to travel between these different areas, is that they are large open hubs that you'll be running around and trying to complete objectives, be those things for your companions, so to speak, or your actual main objectives. Which brings us to the crux of the story. So in this particular game, Styx is after a substance known as quartz, which is being used to power all sorts of crazy machinery, and as it turns out, also Styx. So he has been absorbing the stuff in large quantities, which is giving him access to all sorts of powers, which also just happens to put you on a collision course with a group known as the Inquisition that has even the human NPCs calling them out as creepy. And while stealth obviously plays the biggest and most prominent role, and that includes stuff you would expect, stealth kills, things like that, there's also apparently going to be, according to the Steam page, a sort of Metroidvania style progression where you'll be picking up things like grappling hooks, a glider that's going to let you obviously glide around, especially in the area like the wall, which is set up very vertically. Now, like I mentioned, we are after all of that quartz, and that is going to actually see us progressing in that way as well. Basically, as you hoover up all the quartz that you're after, it's going to give you points and things, and you'll earn talent points as well, that you'll put into various abilities, like the ability to clone yourself or set up cocoons, also just turn invisible for short periods of time, things like that. You'll also collect blueprints, which will give you access to tools like darts and acid vials, things like that you'll be able to utilize in various ways at the same time. But then, of course, there's also the basic stealth mechanics, and while that obviously does include things like line of sight, there's also things like managing the sounds you make. That is to say, running into things can produce sound, dropping from heights onto non-soft surfaces can cause noise that then guards will come investigate, things like that. But there's also all sorts of environmental stuff that you can use to your advantage as well, such as knocking down chandeliers or other heavy objects onto enemies, which is always a classic. You can even if you find them, poison things that the enemies will be eating from or drinking from. And those things, combined with the different abilities and skills, on top of also the pretty intricately laid out areas that you find yourself running through, just had me feeling like I had a ton of ways to address any given situation. And so putting a lot of that together, like I mentioned, I just enjoyed this more than I thought I would, not least of which because of its approach to these large open areas, acting more as hubs that you can explore and find your way through, and then you get that actual player hub for you via the Zeppelin. And I simply find myself wondering exactly what the limits of a lot of this stuff are. Like I mentioned, there was one of your crew members that gave me a quest, which seems to imply at least that these guys get like little storylines. All of the progression was fun, exploring was fun, but nonetheless, I do have a couple of concerns before I leave you guys with this one, and that is two things primarily. One, The controls take some getting used to. Like, for instance, in order to scale a wall, you have to like jump first and then dash into the wall, and then you'll start climbing up, which just feels strange, all things considered. And on top of that, I would say pretty much all the voice acting, at least in the demo, was a little on the rough side, which isn't a deal breaker for me personally, but I do know it's the kind of thing that grates on some people, so figured I would mention it for sure. Putting all of that together, however, I just wanted to say that I had a really good time with this demo, and while I am not committing to reviewing this, it releases in full on February 19th, I believe. It's certainly on my radar, and if I find myself with some spare time, I may well choose to go ahead and take a look at it. Now, if I did move to review this title, some of the questions that I would have in mind for my own personal curiosity would be, how much do they make of these crew members? Do they provide meaningful impact to the game itself? Because, while again that one offered me a quest, in every other instance in which I am running around with these guys, they are typically just off screen while I then go sneak around and stab everything. Which is, I think, fine for a stealth game, but I would be curious to see if they played a more meaningful role. Another part of this that I'm actually pretty curious about is the different biomes. So the demo itself ends right as you would get access to the 3 different areas. The wall, which is the main area you're running around in for the sort of prologue, I guess you could call it. But we're also supposed to be getting access to a place like the Turquoise Dawn, which is an orc village, as well as the ruins of the elven capital Akanash. And given how well this game seems to do with things like environmental interactions, things like that, I would hope that those biomes were more than just, a change in the color palette, that type of thing. And then, of course, there's the progression. With stealth games, what can happen is that you progress to a certain point that you are just like wildly overpowered. And at least here in the early game, if you get caught, you're pretty much dead because it's difficult to get away from enemies and they can kill you very, very quickly. Even on normal difficulty, and that's to say nothing of Goblin Mode, which is an absolutely hilarious name for a max difficulty in this context. And just for my own personal curiosity, I would want to know how much this game winds up relying on like progression and just making your character very overpowered through those methods, or if it sort of retains some of that, let's say, tension by making sure that you are always very frail. But honestly, I'm just glad to be asking those questions because, if you couldn't tell, I enjoyed this demo a lot, and hopefully you'll try it out for yourself. But for right now, I think that's pretty much going to do it. And to that end, if you'd like to tell me how you feel about it, by all means, feel free to do so down in the comment section below, which naturally means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.